Welcome to the first webinar hosted by The Sacred Everything. My name is Travis Sheehan, co-founder of the Sacred Everything podcast. We explore what we call the three medicines, which are inner and psychospiritual healing, nature reconnection, and community life revival. Today, we're going to focus on reciprocity with nature, how to reconnect and rewild ourselves. Today, we have three really incredible and inspirational guest speakers, and they're going to interact on a few questions. And I'll just read you a little bit about the agenda today. We're going to have the speakers introduce themselves and their organizations. I know that they can do a significantly better job than I, articulating how they impact the community, sort of what their path has been to get there. And after about 5 minutes apiece of that, we're going to go into a discussion. And the discussion is going to cover what is the interplay between self, nature, and community in your program. And because we have such a diverse set of folks here, right? Folks that are working with wildlife reconnection, with wilderness exploration, with permaculture. There's so many different modalities of how us as humans can start to, some folks use the word go back to indigeneity, to understand the language of the land, to understand ourselves through community and interaction with nature. And as we sort of round out that discussion, we'll turn it over to a conversation with the audience. I'm sure folks that have chosen to join today have an incredible amount to contribute themselves and are innovators in their own right. And I'd like to just sort of get us kicked off and say if folks have questions, please feel free to save them until the end, and you can actually put them in the chat window if you're able to access that. I appreciate everybody's time and attention and attendance today, and I'm really looking forward to it. So why don't we get kicked off, and we can start ladies first with Susan. Why don't you go ahead and give us 5 minutes about you?
This is one of the times you don't want to be a ladies first. So my name is Susan Irick. I always loved nature and was connected to it, but someone invited me to help him raise wolf puppies some 30 years ago. And I was very happy as a psychologist. I was working in supermax prisons and really enjoying the work. But then when I met the wolf puppies, that was simply the end of life as I knew it. I'd had deep connections with nature before, but that was the deepest ever. I felt totally hopelessly, passionately in love. And they also all fell ill. And so it was a lot of nursing, a lot of holding them and feeling the connection. And I could swear that I felt oxytocin flowing through my body. And I began to feel the intense vitality on a level I'd never felt before of who they are and the connection. And as I began to sense their brilliance and their vitality and their passion, I mean, a little wolf would, at 2 weeks old, raise their little muzzle to the sky and start to howl out of passion. So the connection was so deep and so beautiful. I simply felt I had to share this. I had to share this with everyone. So because of the richness for what it would do for us as humans, and for the beginning understanding of what's out there for us if we deal with a win-win kind of situation, what we can still have if we save it. Not just to focus on what we lose, which kind of just dispirits us, even though it's necessary to know, but the utter magic that's available. And I was lucky enough from then on the partner who invited me was training wild animals for movies. And because of that, he also had other animals. Ultimately, they also came over to the nonprofit Earthfire. But in the process, I learned about, so we have animals that are native to the Yellowstone to Yukon Wildlife Corridor. So we have bears, black bears, grizzly bears, bison, wolves, coyotes, cougars, foxes, whatever mammals that are native to this whole area. Where I'm located, if I throw a stone that way, I'll hit the Grand Teton of Grand Teton National Park. So I'm right in the wildlife corridor and all the magic of that. And each time I met an animal, I'd fall in love again. So it didn't matter. It wasn't a particular wolf. It wasn't wolves. It wasn't a particular bear. It's that you can fall in love over and over and over again with everything. And just my awareness began to grow, and as it grew, I wanted to share that more and more with my fellow humans. Again, from the psychology part of me, meaning I like working with people. What a beautiful thing to help us understand and share and join and have for ourselves. And then for nature, which is not different from us, it's a really weird thing to use the word nature as if it's nature and we're not part of it, as if every breath we take isn't connecting us. So yeah, I wanted to help us connect ever more deeply. And for me, I've been doing this for years, and every year, every day almost, it gets deeper and richer. It's like a lifelong, unending journey. And so it's just wonderful. And there's so much joy available for us and so much beauty available for us. If we think of that as a story and a vision, something to work towards, and understand the connection and interconnection at a vivid, visceral, physical level, understand how we're connected to trees and the air and the water and the wolves or our dogs and our cats. It doesn't make any difference what it is. Once we feel that connection, we start to feel differently in terms of how we use things. We want to use less. We want to use less land. We want to have a smaller building. We want to use fewer clothes. We want to take only what we need and really evaluate what we need versus what we want or what we're taught we want. So in the end, what I really am trying to do is help us. And for me, it's a learning process just as much. So I don't want to say help people because it's as if people are different from me. No, we're all in a mess together or possible beauty together. How can we make almost 180-degree flip from what we are taught is important, money, status, etc., to what's really important and really nurtures us? Art, music, connection with other life, helping life grow and bloom. Really, it needs to be a 180-degree flip because we're taught exactly the opposite: rush, consume, etc. We all know that. I don't have to repeat it. So my passionate 24-hour day mission, because I feel like I dream at it at night, is to help us really see the beauty and wonder around us through the animals I have here. I'm privileged to care for here, and have them serve as a portal out into the larger picture, and how we can use that energy to save land, because love means nothing if you just love and you don't do anything with it. So what's the most important thing we need to do from my side? And it doesn't mean it's the most important altogether, but what I'm working on is using the passion and the connection to help us save land so the animals have a place to live. Without that, we lose them. Well, I don't know if that's 5 minutes, Travis.
That was on the dot. Thank you. And for those of you who don't know Susan, she happens to be a licensed psychologist. She happens to run this nonprofit called the Earth Fire Institute that is this wildlife sanctuary. And while she gave you the personal aspect, she is really running programming for individuals and groups to come out and understand their own individual purpose, their own individual balance with life by reconnecting with nature. So if that sounds attractive to anybody on the call, that's kind of what the practice that she does. And it's very exciting to hear sort of the personal journey up to that. So thank you, Susan, for sharing. And why don't we hop to Nick next?
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Travis. Really excited to be here today. My name is Nick DiDomenico. I am a regenerative designer, regenerative farmer, and builder. I live over here on the Front Range of Colorado, just about 15 miles north of Boulder, and actually grew up in this little valley here, the Front Range Boulder Valley, and then spent a lot of time in South America, was studying with some tribes down there, and heard about permaculture for the first time and was really inspired just to see how people were building food systems in these off-grid communities and just learning about different ecological systems and all of that. And when I came back to Colorado, gosh, it's going on 10 years ago. 7 years ago, we started our farm, Elk Run Farm, up here north of Boulder. And it was a really degraded property, desertifying, a lot of prairie dogs, almost no soil, had likely been damaged and degraded by cattle operations in the 20 or 30 years prior to that, and hadn't really been used agriculturally for at least 20 years before I arrived here. The buildings were pretty degraded. It had been owned by a tenant leasing company for a while, so just trash all over the property, buildings kind of falling over. And at that point in my life, I was only 25. I really wanted to just grow my own food. I had been studying permaculture design. I'd been studying from different folks that are now mentors and supporters of mine, and just was really excited to grow my own food and to reconnect with nature that way. And I'd become really disenchanted by modern society. I'd seen so many of my friends go to college and come out with degrees that they couldn't find jobs in, and at the same time watching the Front Range of Colorado just dry up and not getting the summer rains that we used to get, and just land all around me just turning into deserts, and just really feeling the immensity of that. And at the same time, I just wanted to be on the land growing food. And so the property that I'm on here now, it doesn't have irrigation rights. And if anybody knows Colorado and the arid West, that's the most important thing in farming is the water. So without the water, at least that's what they told me, was that we couldn't farm at all. And we're really lucky to have one prolific well, like a 40-foot deep artisan spring on the property. It's just enough to, have amazing tasting drinking water for our livestock that we were going to have, obviously, and enough to start irrigating little gardens. So I began putting to work the design practices and principles that I had been studying about, and built some gardens, and then began to develop large actualized ecological systems. So brought in livestock, pigs, chickens, sheep, and ducks to begin to regenerate the land, and developing these practices that I call intensive livestock management for the purpose of building soil. Began developing forest gardens, which are gardens mimicking forest ecology, using all diverse food crops, medicines, fruits, berries, all the most wonderful things that humans would want to be around. We've decided to plant those in our gardens surrounding our house. And then from there begun to kind of approach the super degraded drylands, like no soil pastures that have now become our demonstration sites for the nonprofit Drylands Agroecology Research. So we've been using large actualized earthworks, using heavy machinery to catch and store every drop of moisture that falls on the property. And through these techniques have developed an agroforestry system, Drylands agroforestry system, where we've been able to successfully plant over 1,000 trees and shrubs, all fruiting and useful crops. Brought back a desertified parcel into pasture for our sheep using keyline design, keyline plowing, these different regenerative techniques that we've been studying. And then through that, developed a nonprofit with my partner, Marissa Pulaski. So Drylands Agroecology Research is the name of the nonprofit. And so we've begun doing regenerative design and consultation for other landowners in the area, from others that want to develop regenerative systems on already set up farms, and even as far as bringing back completely degraded and desertifying parcels into production for farmers. So we've begun working with the city of Boulder and the county of Boulder to help to restore land in the area. We also hold educational classes here, permaculture design classes at our farm that's now become Elk Run. My partner Marissa has a young childhood education program on the farm, so a little preschool, farm school, to educate the children and to help them reconnect with nature in that way through our farming systems. And then at the same time, we have a deep investment in cultural advocacy, just understanding that where you'll find degraded populations and communities and marginalized communities and cultures, you'll often find degraded land. And that's something that we've noticed. And with the different practices that we've been developing, have brought these systems and patterns to different native reservations that have been helping develop food sovereignty projects, and just supporting the cultural revival and reconnection with just those that have been marginalized in the world today, and just really want to support the resurgence and the renewal of culture, land-based culture, nature-based culture. And so have been having tours at our homestead, and yeah, I think that's about all I have to share for now.
Thank you so much. And just as having personally been to the farm and having taken one of these permaculture tours and understanding the level of love that y'all put into the land, when we were walking around, there was this vine ripe tomato in the middle of the summer in Colorado, and they just said, take as many as you want. And Marissa gave us this sort of medicinal and edible plant tour. And I have never been transformed so easily by simply taking a vine ripe tomato and eating it. And that connection of reciprocity with nature is like, oh, you put in the work and she gives back. And I think if everybody had the experience of a sun-warmed tomato hitting their lips once every month or so, we might think differently about our food systems. And so you bring up food sovereignty, and I think it is just like at almost the top of practical revolutionary things that the permaculture movement is doing. So I appreciate what you're doing, and thank you for that. And why don't we move on to Jared?
Welcome, everyone. Thanks for having me. My name is Jared Archbold, and I work for a nonprofit called Wilderness Awareness School. And we are on the western slope of the Cascade Mountains, about an hour east of Seattle. And I am a program manager for all of our adult programs here, as well as I am the core instructor for our nature instructor training, which is an apprenticeship program to learn how to lead our programs. And I got into this work a long time ago, really kind of coming out of college, getting really interested in awareness and meditation, human potential. Got into hypnotherapy for a while, went and did that. And just kind of, there was like a thread I was following. At the time, I didn't realize that. I just thought I was bouncing around from thing to thing. But eventually got really into transformational seminar work and learning how to manage programs and facilitate. And then got left that and got really back into nature connection personally. Was kind of in this transformational period of time in my life, and just found myself really drawn to wild spaces and going to the beach and climbing rocks and climbing trees, and ended up finding a personal training modality that literally trained you in how to do those things, which was the coolest thing ever. So I went and got certified in that and started a business and was doing that kind of stuff. And there was still something missing. I was like, this is incredible, but it doesn't quite go far enough. So I started getting really curious again and reading more books, looking into more things, and was continually being inspired by indigenous cultures from my own ancestry in old ways of living that were much more in tune and in sync with the natural world. And really seeing the impacts of our modern world and how those really lead to lifestyles that aren't that fulfilling. And so doing lots of research and trying to find more training or programs that would train me more about how to learn more indigenous wisdom, to live closer to the land, and gain the skills to do that, to find more community, things like that, and found Wilderness Awareness School. And at the time, the program was called the Anake Outdoor School. It was a 9-month adult program. We now call that the Immersion Program. And came up and, pretty much the first day was like, yeah, this is it. This is exactly what I'm looking for. And really what the program is about is it teaches you all kinds of things, from survival skills to like wild crafting, to community leadership, to mentoring, on and on and on. There's so many things that it teaches, and with a real deep foundation in community. The thing that got me on the website was we teach the most vital survival skill of all, which is how to live in community. And I didn't see that on any of the other websites. So anyway, I came up, did that first year program, loved it so much, stuck around, did the second year as an apprentice, learning how to facilitate programs like this. And then eventually came back and accepted a position in the administration, managing programs. And a couple of years ago, got the opportunity to start leading our apprentice program, and haven't really looked back. And really the mission of Wilderness Awareness School is through nature connection and cultural mentoring, we provide transformational experiences that awaken people's unique gifts, deepen their relationship with nature, and empower them to enrich the health of their communities. And there's a lot of magic that happens at the school. But the thing that I kind of want to highlight here for you all is something we call primary satisfactions. There's things that as humans, we came to life, like our bodies just came to life expecting certain experiences, expecting coming into a village of people that knew us from birth, who knew our stories and were eager to hear our stories each day, to sit around a fire, to cook together, to eat together, to sing together, to dance together, to be deeply, intimately related to the surrounding land and world around us, and to have personal relationships with the wild beings that we come across day to day. Not just, oh, that's a junco bird, but like, oh, that's the junco bird that ate out of my hand a week ago. So like just deep intimacy to where those boundaries between like me as a human and you as another species start to get really blurry. And the fulfillment, the connection, the beauty that is possible in that is just stunning. And so that's what I'm here to share more about with you today.
Thank you so much, Jared. And I think perhaps of the three, of the three presenters, this idea of sort of tangible community we see in everyday life, whether that's in a suburb or on the farm, nature and the self is very directly approached by Wilderness Awareness School. And when we were doing our interview on our third podcast with you, it just blew my mind, because there's a lot of purpose coaching and like individual coaching that's going on, and mentoring for folks that want to sort of break out of their norm. And something that you said just struck me so profoundly, which was that what we're doing at Wilderness Awareness School is much more ancient than that. It's not about you. It's not about how you can take your gifts and go make money in the world. It's about being in the crucible of community that then forms what your gifts are and how they relate out to a larger purpose. And that is such a incredible nuance in my mind, because in a society rife with individualism, with righteous individualism and consumerism, it's very challenging to think that I could form my identity not just alone and by myself, but actually in community. So I appreciate that, and I appreciate what you teach. And you know, I'm really hoping to make this session as interactive as possible. And what I want to do is I want to kick off with this question, and maybe just the preface in general. What I hope folks get out of this, which I probably should have said at the beginning, is, you know, climate change and my role. I'm a city planner. I work on clean energy development work every day. I don't see that being the full picture. I see nature reconnection, inner healing, and community life revival being essential components, which is like what Jared was saying, of how we transform society in our hearts as a whole. And so this question is seated in the purpose of our organization, of the Sacred Everything, which is, what is the interplay between self, nature, and community in your program? In take it however you want, speakers. You know, talk more about the community, or talk more about the self experience, or talk more about the connection to nature. Whatever rings a bell in that question of the interplay between them, and how they're self-enhancing, self-reaffirming, self-developing, and interbeing, that would be great. And then what I'd love is with that as a prompt, we open it up to discussion among everybody. And perhaps because you're the experts on this call, we can have question and answer about your program, about more nuanced details from that which you spoke of. So why don't we switch it up? We'll go with Nick first, then we'll go to Jared, then Susan. You're on mute, Nick. It wouldn't be a good call if you weren't on mute.
Better now? Cool. So we're talking about the interplay of self, nature, and community in regards to our organizations. That's awesome. Yeah. Gosh, there's so many directions to go with this one for me. You know, for me, it brings me back to a time when I was with one of my teachers. His name is Dave Jackie. He's one of the authors of Edible Forest Gardens, one of the premier forest ecology design textbooks, really, in permaculture design. And he shared this concept with us that was about the idea of self-transformation through land transformation. And it's something that we've really deeply rooted in here. And Dave Jackie, his theory was that so many of us grow up and live in these degraded environments, these environments of concrete and buildings and structures that just do not uplift us and resonate with the true harmony of nature and life and love. And that by us as humans coming back to nature and seeing and witnessing her patterns, and then applying ourselves to be the stewards of her patterns, to implement and to create and form her patterns on the earth, that through that we transform ourselves. And for me, in terms of the self, that's been the deepest experience for me, having some challenges with food, being a serial overeater as a kid, an athlete. My Italian grandma would push that pasta on us. You're getting skinny, Nicky, eat some pasta kind of thing, come from this just broken culture of not understanding how to feed myself, how to nourish myself. And so for me, I spent the first 3 years of the time at Elk Run only eating what I could grow on the land. And, friends would bring over food and things, and I'd eat it and enjoy it and accept the gifts, because not wanting to turn down any of, the love from our people. But just this idea that by being able to put our hands in the ground and to develop these systems to grow food, that I was able to find healing myself. And then through that, just growing in our community here, slowly bringing on people to help me, first my good brothers and my friends, and this little fraternity kind of almost commune. We were called a commune at times, just like these different young men developing these farm systems and managing livestock and growing gardens. And just through that, starting to bring in more people to support us, and the women folk to help us feel supported and connected, brought on partners and lovers. And Marissa came onto the scene and really just completely opened up the reality to develop the nonprofit. It was really through her suggestion. It's kind of a funny story. I told her that I wanted to plant all these trees. I had a 501c3 and a bank account, and I told her I don't have any money. I need money to build these earthworks and plant these trees. And she said, no, it's fine. No big deal. Like, I'll just throw a big party. She's an event producer and a dance enthusiast, ecstatic dance community coordinator. And I said, well, sure. Yeah. However we can do it, like, that sounds fun, and sure enough, we set up a GoFundMe. We had a huge event. 150 people came out to the farm that year and raised thousands of dollars, had this beautiful, wonderful event, live music and party. And I just remember looking out into the crowd and realizing that it's the community that really makes it all possible. It's this investment together in something good. The community came together and supported us. And then we were able to plant all of these trees, thousands of trees that have become our research program, where we're researching agroforestry crops and drylands conditions, growing trees without water. And really, it's just Mother Nature herself that's teaching us, like, that's how I feel about it. It's like my apprenticeship with Mother Nature has been here at our farm and our experimentation site and homestead, and just being with her every day, waking up with her son, waking up with the beauty of this life, and just being able to walk out and hear the birds. And we're really lucky to have wilderness right behind us, like open space right behind us, and big herds of elk and deer come right through, and just feel really interconnected that way. And just for us, it's this idea of cultural revival, that the new culture that we want to see on earth is based on connection and empathy, especially with ourselves and with each other, and with nature in that way, that just by taking care of her and applying ourselves to understanding her, nature, Mother Earth herself, that we find connection with ourselves and are then able to connect with others in a resonant way, to work together in community to build the new world that we want to live in. So we're really excited to do that. I hope that wasn't too long.
That was perfect on timing, and I'm like glowing a little bit more right now because everything's resonating. And you're like the permaculture guy here, right? I'm in the suburbs in Florida, but I want to reconnect with nature. But all we do is prune stuff back because it grows too fast. Is that good enough? Is a houseplant good enough? Is composting good enough? Like, what could somebody who is at zero do to just start and feel like they're working with her today?
Oh gosh. Well, hopefully all of us are lucky enough. Is this a question for me? All right. Okay. My take on it, hopefully all of us are lucky enough to have open spaces, even in the cities and suburbs that we're in. And if we don't, we need to vacate those urban environments and move towards places with more natural and green space. And for me, it's that waking up with the sun and touching the ground, feeling the earth. All of us can plant pots of vegetables on our balconies if we need to. We can turn our lawns into gardens. We can start collecting and capturing the rainwater that falls on our roofs and sink it into the soil in our lawns, and build gardens of native plants and perennials, and just make a choice to feel connected, make a choice to feel gratitude, to understand that Mother Nature, Mother Earth is the provider of all of our health and wellness. And then again, supporting local farms, investing in projects that are planting trees and building ecosystems and developing soil building techniques. Any way that we can sink carbon and now water, I believe, is the most important thing that we can capture in the soil. We're learning more and more that water is the most important greenhouse gas. And so for us to be able to capture it in the soil, this is really new scientific thinking that some of my mentors locally are teaching us, that we want to capture water in the soil. So collecting rainwater, supporting your local farmers, just getting out in nature and being in nature, I think is the best way. So thanks, Travis.
Amen. And I'm sure people are sort of burning with questions or have thoughts about what they like to talk to. There is a question function, and on my screen it's shown in this little box of shapes. It's like a triangle, a box, and a circle. Feel free to just start populating that with questions, and we can kind of pick out from them what the most popular ones are. Over to you, Jared. Same question. What is the interplay between self, nature, and community in your program?
Okay. Well, there's a very indigenous perspective and idea that everything in our world has a unique gift, or I've heard it said as original instructions, that we come to this plane, this life, to give to the world. And as we've found, and the way we've designed our programs, is that can't happen in a vacuum. That must happen in relationship. So that happens in relationship with other humans, so in community, and it happens in relationship with the wild world around us. And so we build our curriculum and our rites of passage and everything we do here around those two core foundations. And Charles Eisenstein talks about, you protect what you love. And it's in this intimacy, in this relationship building and tending, that is both self-serving in that it helps reflect back to us our own unique gifts and original instructions to then give to our people, to our relations. But it also, by building these relationships, what we consider me, what I, Jared, consider Jared, is no longer contained at the edge of my skin. It's now much larger and incorporates the land that I belong to, which is many lands, as I am a modern human who has moved a few times. And it encapsulates the people I love and care about and rely on to live my life. And so by thinking in these ways and tending these relationships and seeking out new ones and developing this, we build this web, this really beautiful constellation of relationships that allow all of us to continue to be inquiring into and being curious about and pulling on threads and tracking things to discover ongoingly what is unique about me that is the greatest contribution to the world. What is it that that through my life experience, through the relationships I've developed, through the skills that I just naturally am really good at and that I love to do, that my body sings when I express in these ways? What are those? And then the work of how do I then figure out how to give those in a way that feeds me, feeds my community, feeds the land and the world around me. And it's our belief that it's in this work and in this approach, that it's not about resisting the things that are bad, or, oh, we need to stop using oil or any of these things. It's like, no, let's lean into the relationships. Let's get messier. Let's get more interconnected, because those questions will actually solve themselves if we are that we are all of it. And we have that embodied visceral experience of that deep relationship, that deep connection, and that who we are doesn't end at our skin.
Amen. I love the message, and it is so counter to a lot of what I've experienced in my life, right? Which is you got to make the big paycheck so you can pay for the things, and then you can buy the green things that will save the world, you know? And what you're saying is almost like get real with yourself and get real with what makes you sing. And from there, we're not going to need as much from the outside world. We will be part of it already. And so that pulls a lot of heartstrings. I appreciate that, Jared. And why don't we go to Susan to continue with this? What is the interplay between self, nature, and community in your program? You're on mute, Susan.
Thanks. I don't think of it as a program to begin with. It's sort of a vision that I'm trying to share, though people can come to visit on a limited basis so they can make a real connection with the animals. We're not a zoo. One aspect of our mission is to expand our sense of community, to truly expand our sense of community, similar to what you're saying, Jared, to include all living beings. So if you're in a community, you're not thinking of the community as the ice skating rink. It's everything, all the life around you in that community, to expand our sense of community and live from that place and have the animals here help with that. The other thing is, you called us experts. For myself, I think that's not always a useful way of thinking things, because I think we're all experts. All we have done in our particular cases, us three speakers, is we spent more time with something, so we have a little more information. But expert is can help us think that other people know more than us, and we shouldn't be using our own judgment. There's that risk in there. So I think firmly that we each, as you were saying too, Jared, that we each have a tremendous unique gift, and that's our own expertise that we can bring. That's just two asides for me. How to connect with nature is an interesting question, because we are nature, but one of the major things it requires is time. We can connect with the house plant in our apartment in the city, or we can go to a wilderness place. We don't need to have bears or a wilderness. We can connect to it everywhere, because it is everywhere. One aspect is we have to be aware that it's possible, and that's part of what my work is, and apparently your guys' work is too. Because if we're so blinded by what's going on around us and the pressures on us that we don't even know it's possible, then we don't even try. And if you have a little glimpse that it's possible, often people just blossom into it because we're so hungry for it. To bring it down to ground a little more, you mentioned that your body sang, Jared. It made me think of a baby badger we had. His mother was shot, and we had her in a small enclosure till we could build something else for her. And while we were building something else for her, without realizing, we were piling all kinds of soil around her enclosure. And for the first time since we got her, she was able to start playing in soil and dig. And that badger was singing. She was singing with joy because she was able to do what was her unique gift. Well, not her unique, she had many, but an aspect of herself she was able to express. And I love what all of you guys are doing. To add another dimension to it, because we could probably talk a long time, but to add another dimension to what you're talking about, and I 1,000% agree with everything you're doing, and it's just beautiful. But a quick story, and the interesting thing for me is I've told the story hundreds of times. I never get tired of it, and every time I hear it, it's almost like I understand a little more deeply. And that's another aspect of nature connection. It requires time, and then you absorb it, and then you absorb it more, and you absorb it more, and you begin to change more and more and more. That particular story is two bear brothers I had, black bears, who were captive raised originally, and they grew up together, and they would sleep in one another's arms in the winter, and one of them passed away. And a couple of years later, I'll make this very brief, but if anyone's interested, I can tell it in great, beautiful detail. We had a retreat, a couple of weeks actually, and one of the students was sitting in front of the enclosure where Huckleberry Bear was. after his brother passed away a couple of years later. And she was just a little artist, she was an artist from LA and was coming out here to do artwork. And as she sat in front of his enclosure, she started to feel profoundly sad. And she said, "This is weird." And then she found tears streaming down her face, and she said, "This is really weird." She wasn't particularly connected to nature or animals or anything. She was in costume design. And then she heard, not literally the words, but she heard, "I miss my brother." And she said to herself, "This is even weirder because I don't have a brother." But she felt waves of loneliness coming towards her. And she said to him, so to speak, "I'm going to come and visit you every day that I'm here." And then he turned around and went back into his den. And that evening she asked us, did Huckleberry have a brother? She didn't know. And the reason I love this story is because it opens whole new windows into how the world works and magic. And it's kind of irrefutable. She didn't know anything. And yet this bear was communicating his grief to another human being who's completely open without thinking. So from the work here, over and over and over, there are more and more there's stories like that all the time that happen that expand our sense of awareness of what's around us when I talk about the magic and the deep connection that's possible. There are many things, but I want to have lots of time for all of you guys to be able to have a discussion. So
Thank you so much for sharing that story. I saw a couple of people also watering up, and it's to quote the same author as Jared, Charles Eisenstein says, "A miracle is a glimpse and a promise." It's a tiny keyhole into what the world could be if we had opened our perception more, if we open our hearts more. And so your story is like so emblematic of that, really direct. I could speak to an animal, I could speak to a plant, I could influence that animal's happiness, that animal can share emotions with me. So really appreciate that. And yeah, I'm gonna let that wash over me. So how about we move on to the questions? There's a lot of richness that's been shared. What I often think is very respectful of the speakers is if we sort of ask them about their experiences and we sort of draw more information, just because it's the common shared thing. And in the interest of time, we really have 14 minutes until we're going to close this on a timely manner. So those types of questions where we draw out more meaning, I think provide a lot of greater depth for everybody, as opposed to sort of just like sharing our own story for 5 or 10 minutes, because that's easy to do, is to want to share more here. But I would appreciate if folks sort of started chiming in with their own questions. So in the chat, I don't see any questions. And then I'm also in that Q&A space, and I will just write my own question here, which is hi, and post it. I wonder, does that pop up for folks? Do you see? Okay, you do. Okay. So either use the raise your hand function or go ahead and put it in this Q&A. The floor is open. Well, absent an existing round of questions, which I'm not seeing, give me a shout if anybody is asking questions right now. Maybe we'll go out to the audience with a direct question about your personal experience. Would you mind sharing maybe a 30-second or a 1-minute version of how you've been personally impacted by nature? How that's led to some version of transformation for you? Okay. I'm just getting Marta raising her hand here. And then I did receive a question from Zav. So why don't we go, Marta, would you like to go ahead?
Sure. I have a nice patio. I live pretty much in the woods. And so I was sitting out on my patio a couple summers ago, and along the railing was an insect. And I just started to watch it and realized that this little creature was making decisions, was deciding where he or she was going to go, and then would stop and just kind of take in the sunshine. And that sort of prompted me to realize, oh, it doesn't matter how small or how big, we all share consciousness. And I began to notice other little creatures that were clearly thinking about what they were going to do. Maybe I'm anthropomorphizing, but it seems like there definitely were decisions being made. And that helped me to really grasp that there's consciousness all around us. So that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you. I'd love if our speakers have any reflections on that or stuff that rings a bell with. More than welcome to chime in.
Yeah, I love it. Thank you for sharing that beautiful moment. Yeah, I'm just thinking of moments in my own life where I've experienced similar things. Thanks for sharing that.
I see, like you, Marta, I see intelligence infused into everything. How could it be any other way? And it's just different forms. There's a fundamental intelligence and then different forms of intelligence. There's mouse intelligence and bear intelligence and tree intelligence. But it's all an underlying seeking and creating and creativity infused everywhere. And boy, what a way that is to live when you can remember that and not get lost in our, quote, human world.
That's great. Thank you. Well, we can move on to Zav, who has his hand raised. He was next, and then we can go to Katie after that.
Hi. So my question is really, I come from schools of thought where I used to be a human rights activist for Amnesty, and then I worked for Greenpeace when I was a kid. And it was always about how many people do we have joining the path? And so I felt like throughout my whole life, I've been on this pattern of how to get more people to join a cause. And it's a very exhausting path for me these days. Always trying to look at people as an object to bring into your path and educate them and move forward. So I'm just wondering if there's other approaches that you all take where you don't go through that phase of what I'll call burnout or, exhaustion on some level, depleted, when my attention is always about how to get more people involved in the cause that I'm supporting.
If I could respond to that briefly, what you're doing is emphasizing there are two ways of being. One is acting and one is being. One is doing and being. And if you get them out of balance, you get burned out. And you're really busy trying very hard to get people to do things the way you see things. And not that there's anything wrong with that, because I happen to agree with the way I suspect you see things. But to try to get people to do something or to see something is exhausting and in the end doesn't work on a deep level to try to get them to. And this is hard for us to learn. And it's like the being-doing balance or the yin, female, yang, male balance. And if we do too much of the acting, which we tend to do in a Western culture, the male aspect of fixing things and doing, it doesn't work. And difficult as it is, you would agree with this, Travis, because you said it, if we spent more time being, that actually emanates energy out that attracts people to us. And being in connection with ourselves and in connection with nature as a living example. And then we share, but not with desperation. We share out of a sense of, wow, what would it be like if we didn't torture people or whatever it is. And that's not a good example, but you mentioned that. So it's that idea of trying to make things happen that doesn't work. My opinion.
Sorry, Susan. I'll add that we're really blessed in that, especially where we are in the outskirts of Seattle and the culture here and the state of the world, it hasn't been that hard, especially since the pandemic began, to fill our programs and to help people understand this is super important. Usually when I share with people like, oh, this is what I do, this is what I'm up to, they're like, oh, I need that. I think in this late stage capitalism world we find ourselves in, there's just a deep understanding more and more. I feel like more and more people are like, oh, it's these promises I've been given since I was young, they're worthless now. Like they're not coming true. I can't live the American dream, or I can't have these fulfilling, beautiful lives the way I thought I could. And there's this kind of picking our heads up and looking around and being like, oh, well, there's better ways to live. And they're starting to find these threads and these people doing beautiful things in the world. And I think we're one of those groups of people creating beautiful things in the world that when people find out about it, they generally will kind of feel that resonance of that. A lot of us are really happy and fulfilled, and we don't live rich, expensive lives, but we have wonderful, rich lives. And so, yeah, we do some marketing, like everybody, but we don't have to lean that hard on it. And as the world continues to get weirder and crazier, we tend to find more and more people coming and asking for what we have.
I'll just say a quick little bit on that too. Thanks both Susan and Jared for sharing too. I think for me, I'm really facing this burnout reality at times and really choosing to come back into nature's rhythms, just like Susan was sharing. Like for us in the temperate north and the temperate south, I suppose, it's like this idea of winter time and going back into ourselves and rejuvenating and also integrating and coming back into alignment with our purpose and path and preparing for the spring to open again in new pursuits. So I'm just really deepening into that myself as well.
Thank you. Thank you all for sharing. And I just think having such a rich question, right, that's always been on top of my mind, which is everybody's got to change. And the more I hang out with folks like Nick and Jared and Susan, the more I realize it's like painting the fence. It's sort of saying the folks who care about this kind of change, the folks who are looking for this in the world might also be having the same realization that slowing down is half of the work. It's not doing the work is half of the work. And so that's a really rich message to get across. And we do have we really have time for like sort of this quick last question. So I'm happy, Katie, if you'd like to ask it. We did have Kurt, write in and say interested in connection, interplay between individual organizational work. I don't think we'll get to that by the end because I would like to end on time. But Katie, why don't you go ahead and ask away? You're on mute, Katie.
Yes? Can you hear me?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yes.
Susan, I have been really enthralled with Earthfire for quite a while now. Done your conservation conversations and had hoped to do a Council of All Beings with you. I just wanted to say that what we need to do when we're with nature is not just be with nature, but listen. Because I have had an incredible experience with a ponderosa pine. And she is very vocal and has given me a kind of a blueprint on how we might be able to promote love in the world. And I'm going to go with it, but it's because I stopped getting in my own way and actually listened to what she had to say, because this has been years now. And when I'm with her, it sounds very loud and clear. And then when I leave, I start going, what, am I crazy? But I'm not crazy. And this has been for 3 years now. She's been giving me this blueprint, and it's been wonderful, because I think a lot of what has developed for me because of Earth Fire. So I just wanted to say thank you. And I'm going to be doing your storytelling thing on March 8th.
Thank you for that. And so glad you brought up the point of listening.
Yeah.
Being receptive and listening is beautiful. The March 8th thing that Katie, so on March 8th, we're doing an online conversation where people can share their transformational experiences with nature. A warm, safe place to share. My email's on there if anyone's interested. Thanks, Katie.
Very apt. And maybe as we close, this has been a lot more spacious than I expected it to be. So thank you, everybody, for the tenor and the timing and the questions. And Kurt, sorry we didn't get to your question. And I hope if you have comments and you'd like to get in touch with the speakers, you can go in the chat here and ask for their information, or look them up online. They're all very accessible. One call to action. 2 calls to action. 1, if you feel like you don't have enough nature in your life, go get it. And if it's what Nick said, the first thing is put your feet on the ground and let the sun kiss your cheek. And so that's the easiest way to start. And I really urge folks that don't have that right now to go for it. The second call to action, if you liked this, if you appreciate this conversation, we're a very young podcast and organization, and the currency that we could receive right now would be reviews. So if you are on Apple or Google or anything like that, that would be, really a really important way that we can grow and continue to put energy and time into this type of hosting. And I thought it would be so fun if we ended with our favorite animal call. I don't know if that is cliche or taboo, Susan, but with your blessing, it would be fantastic to release all of this amazing energy back out into the world together. And maybe is that okay to do animal calls for sensations of joy and togetherness, Susan?
Absolutely, if it comes from your heart.
Okay, well, everybody get off of mute. And if you're at work, I really hope you do this. And if you're at home and you have a sleeping baby, don't. But we will end after the call. So 1, 2, 3.
Bye all.
Bye, everybody. Thank you so much.
Bye.